The clinking of cutlery against plates filled the ominous silence that reigned over our Wednesday evening dinner. I looked across the table at Roan, my husband of 6 years, trying to find a hint of the loving person I had married in his face. But his gaze avoided mine as he hastily devoured his pasta. My eyes slid to his phone lying next to his plate. A notification blinked, taunting me, begging to be opened. Against my better judgment, I gave in to temptation. Roan didn't even notice as I leaned over and entered the unlock code. The message blinded me like a harsh accusation. Can't wait to feel you inside me again. Meet at our place in an hour. The sender was Marcelo. I read it, my heart pounding, the words etching themselves into my consciousness like shards of broken glass. So this was why he had been so distant lately, coming home late, without explanations, his thoughts constantly wandering in dark corners. "Darling, is something wrong?" Roan asked, pulling me out of my stupor with his perfectly innocent tone, which he had owned over a long time. I slid the phone across the table, at a loss for words. His eyes widened, the mask finally dropped, and a flicker of panic crossed his face. At that moment I realized that the person I thought I knew was just an illusion. "Alara, I can explain," he began, but I cut him off with a raised hand. "Don't bother," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of grief and anger. "Just tell me one thing, how long has this been going on?" Roan opened his mouth, then closed it again. His shoulders slumped in obvious surrender. 6 months, he finally admitted. Those words hit me like a whip to the gut. 6 months. Half a year of lies and deception while I naively took care of our home and made plans for the future with a man who had long since left our marriage. "Who is Shiv?" I demanded, although I already knew the answer. "Marcela," he said, "that beautiful 20-year-old interior designer who worked on a project in my office." He let out a bitter laugh. "Does it even matter? She made me feel something I hadn't felt in years." His words tore apart what was left of my heart. I wanted to collapse on the floor in pain, to scream until my throat was raw, but I refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing me completely broken. Gathering all my strength, I stood up from the chair and headed for the door, grabbing my purse on the way. "Where are you going?" he called after me, his voice finally tinged with concern. I turned around, my vision blurred by tears. "Away from this farce that was our marriage," I said, and flinging open the door, rushed out into the night. Each step away from that house strengthened my resolve. I had been a fool to believe in the perfect life we were building together, but that illusion had finally shattered beyond repair. Devastated, I spent a restless night in a hotel. Tears streamed down my face as the full weight of Roan's betrayal pressed down on me. How could a person I loved, who had vowed to cherish me, so easily discard our marriage? Determined to act, I contacted a private detective recommended by a friend who had gone through a tough divorce. Within a day, he dug up a dirty trail of evidence that made me shake with rage and disgust. Roan wasn't just having an affair with that airheaded designer Marcel. The detective's report revealed multiple infidelities over the past year: emails, credit card statements, and dated photos of Roan entering different hotels with different women. "Miss Davis," the detective said, laying out the incriminating evidence of Roan's escapades before me. "Your husband wasn't careful." I clenched my fists, fighting waves of nausea. One name and face stood out in particular: Marcelo, whose mocking message had blown the lid off this sordid affair. "I want to know everything about her," I said to the detective, my voice dripping with anger. "Where she lives, where she works. Everything." 2 days later, he gave me an address. A luxurious apartment in a prestigious part of the city, which I could never have afforded on my own. Roan must have been funneling money there while I stayed at home, unsuspecting, consumed by reckless impulse. I drove to Marcelo's, gaining entry to the lobby with a temporary code obtained by the detective. The door was unlocked, the perfect opportunity to corner the woman who had ruined my life. I burst in, greeted by the opulent interior that immediately confirmed that my husband's mistress was not struggling. Hello, a silky voice called from another room. Is that you, Roan? I clenched my fists as the slender, raven-haired temptress floated into the room, dressed only in a silk robe that clung to her body. Her eyes widened when she saw me. You, I spat through clenched teeth. The one who destroyed my marriage. Instead of shame, she arched one perfectly groomed eyebrow, and a mocking smile played on her full lips. So this is the famous Merce. Davis, she said, I wondered when you would show up to see the woman your pathetic husband can't resist. White-hot fury surged through me, and before I could stop myself, my hand lashed out, striking her smug face. With a loud smack, she gasped and staggered back, covering her quickly reddening cheek with her hand. You'll regret this, she hissed. Just wait until Roan finds out you're attacking me. He'll leave you for me. Oh, really? I snapped, advancing on her until she was backed against the wall. Let me enlighten you. You're a snake, a homewrecker. He's ruined. He spent our money on hotels, gifts, this expensive apartment, all to woo a cheap tramp like you. Disgust flickered across her face, but the mask of arrogance quickly returned. We'll see, she said. This isn't over, Merce. Davis. Far from it. I watched with disgust as she slithered away. My thirst for revenge burned hotter than ever. No, I thought bitterly as I left, this is just the beginning. After the explosive confrontation with Marcelo, I was seething like a volcano of pain and rage, ready to erupt at any moment. I stormed back home, where Roan had already moved his things into the guest bedroom while I was on my vengeful quest. His eyes widened as he saw me burst through the front door. Alara, what's going on? He asked, alarmed by the stormy expression on my face. I didn't answer with words. Instead, I threw the incriminating evidence gathered by the detective across the room, allowing the printed photos and statements to scatter like confetti. For the first time, realizing the full extent of his sins, he looked at me in horror. You've been cheating on me with multiple women, I stated, keeping my voice dangerously calm. For over a year. And that's not even the worst of it. I held up another packet of papers detailing the exorbitant sums Roan had transferred to a hidden account, no doubt for his lavish escapades with his mistresses. The money, Roan, I sang. How could you steal from our accounts to wine and dine whores? Instead of remorse, a flash of anger crossed his face. He straightened up, radiating fury. Don't you dare speak to me in that sanctimonious tone, he said. You're no saint. A saint? I repeated incredulously. Did you really think I would fade into the background and let you gallop off into your pathetic second life? Yes, he snapped. You were always so righteous, so boring. I want a divorce, Alara. I've already contacted a lawyer to start the process. I'm tired of your judgmental whining and this miserable existence we call a marriage. Those harsh words pierced what was left of my heart. I recoiled, the room spinning as the weight of my shattered world crashed down on me. Through blurred vision, I saw Roan gather his things and walk out the door without looking back. And just like that, it was over. My dreams, my life as I knew it, destroyed in one fell swoop by the man who had vowed to love and cherish me until death did us part. Some vow. Collapsing to the floor amid the ruins of my marriage, I finally gave into the urge to scream. A pain-filled cry tore through the shell of numbness, enveloping the pain that had been inflicted on me. But as the screams subsided, an unusual sense of clarity descended upon me. Through tear-filled eyes, I noticed a familiar rectangle peeking out from one of the folders, the deed to our family home, with only my name on it. My father had insisted that the house be in my name alone. Just in case. At the time, I thought his mistrust was just a quirk of his cantankerous nature. Now I silently thanked him for his foresight. I wouldn't be left with nothing after this devastation. No, with the deed in hand, I would strike back and start anew from the ashes that had crumbled around me. And so it would be. I was just getting started. The following days passed in a haze of pain and rage. I spent many sleepless nights poring over the detective's dossier. My eyes burned from the effort of holding back tears, but tears would solve nothing. Only decisive actions would ensure that I emerged from this nightmare with my pride and financial security intact. Armed with a pile of evidence of Roan's serial infidelities and financial machinations, I walked into the office of Diane Hastings, one of the toughest divorce lawyers in the city. She was a shark in high heels, and I needed all her ferocity. Diane flipped through the documents with an experienced eye, her polished facade cracking slightly as she took in the salacious details. "Good Lord," she muttered, taking off her glasses and looking at me in disbelief. "I've seen my share of philandering scumbags, but your husband is a real piece of work." I smiled weakly at her bluntness. "Can you help me, Diane?" I asked it. "I want to take him for everything he's got." A predatory smile played on her lips. "Idiot. With this kind of evidence, he won't know what hit him," she said. In the next week, Diane and I built an ironclad strategy to decimate Roan's finances and hold him accountable for his numerous infidelities. We not only froze the funds he had squirreled away for his second life, but also secured substantial alimony considering the scale of the betrayal and financial improprieties. "It was Marcelo the key to it all," Diane said, tapping her pen on a photo of my husband's smug mistress. "For the money," she said, "we can go after her assets. Trust me, that interior design job pays for a lot of silicon." My heart raced at the prospect of making Marcella face the same retribution that awaited Roan. After our venomous confrontation in her apartment, she had disappeared, probably expecting her sugar daddy's wallet to continue funding her luxuries. She was in for a rude awakening. Meanwhile, Roan had gone suspiciously quiet, no doubt in denial and dreaming of the mistress who had become his fiancée. If only he knew that our once loving relationship was about to turn into a bloody battle, leaving him penniless and disgraced. Finally, the storm broke when Diane delivered a lightning-fast strike, serving Roan with a motion to freeze all his assets based on evidence of misuse of family funds for his affairs. He had no choice but to appear in court and face the destruction he had sown. The look of horror on his face at the first hearing almost made up for the betrayal I had endured. His haughty mistress was nowhere to be seen. Perhaps she had wised up and bowed out before I destroyed her meal ticket. Roan's outrage turned to fury as Diane mercilessly laid out the exhaustive evidence of his double life, from statements to hotel receipts with the names of his mistresses. His lawyer could only stammer helplessly, stunned by our approach. "You're making a big mistake," Roan growled, catching up with me in the courthouse hallway after the humiliating session. For a moment I saw a glimpse of the man I had loved in his eyes. "Alara, we can stop this," he said. "We can work it out. Start over." I looked at him with icy contempt as Diane watched, ready to intervene. "Did you really think I would fade into the background and let you gallop off into your pathetic second life?" I asked, savoring the sting of my words. His face hardened into an unfamiliar grimace. "You'll pay for this," he hissed. Diane stepped between us, raising her hand in warning. I gave her a reassuring glance. After everything he had put me through, his threats bounced off me. "You brought this on yourself, Roan," I said, turning to leave. "And I'm just getting started." After that explosive hearing, the battle between Roan and me turned into a dirty exchange of accusations. His lawyers accused me of fabricating evidence of secret meetings with men to frame him for infidelity. A rich claim from a man who had been bankrolling multiple mistresses in our marriage. I faltered but did not break. Fate handed me this reprieve in the most unexpected way, as the detective updated me on the legal disputes. He noticed that Marcelo wasn't sitting still. "Really?" I said, freezing, clutching the phone. "What do you mean?" "I did some digging on that Miss Perfect," he explained. "She's not just living with your soon-to-be ex. There's evidence that she's entertaining an elderly wealthy businessman on the side." Rage flared. The same smug woman was pulling the same trick with multiple men. At that moment, a devious plan formed in my mind. "Dig deeper into this man," I ordered. "I want to know everything. Who he is, where they meet. Everything." A devilish grin spread across his face. "You've got something juicy brewing in that head of yours, Mars." "Davis," he said. I met his gaze with one of cold determination. "Marcelo thinks she can cling to married men without consequences. It's time she got a taste of her own medicine." Over the next week, the detective and I, along with Diane, built an ironclad case confirming Marcelo's liaisons. We obtained photos of her entering the luxurious condo of business magnate Christopher Woodrow, a man in his 60s. In situations like these, mistresses often assure their lovers that they won't leave their spouses for a woman like Mrs. Woodrow. If she found out that her husband was being played by the same brazen hussy who was targeting other wealthy men, it could be the final straw. My eyes gleamed with anticipation. Marcelo was about to get a reality check when we exposed her infidelities. If she thought she could wreck marriages for personal gain, her world was about to come crashing down. And Roan, when the footage of his fiancée with other lovers behind his back surfaced, any sympathy for him would be an insult to men. Both were perfect targets, greedy, arrogant, and now lambs to the slaughter I was preparing. By the end of the week, everything was in place for the counterstrike. I could barely contain my excitement as I dialed Diane. "It's time," I said, my voice filled with determination. "Let's burn this facade to the ground." The charity gala at the Webb became the perfect stage for my revenge. The glamorous event, attended by the city's elite, including Roan and Marcelo, basking in their reputation as a glamorous couple. They had no idea that their relationship was about to be blown to smithereens in front of everyone. No amount of charm would protect them from the reckoning. Diane and I arrived at the ballroom of the West Bridge Hotel, our eyes scanning the crowd for our targets. There she was, Marcelo, her clingy dress leaving little to the imagination. My eyes lingered on her hairdo as I whispered, feeling a pang of disgust and pity for the man I had once loved. It was time. The setup was flawless. Under the guise of collecting donations, I handed the detective's assistant the photos and videos of Marcelo's infidelities. The bomb was set. Soon, whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. Guests gasped, pointing at their iPhones as the images of Marcelo with her elderly lover went viral. Someone recognized Christopher Woodrow, and the scandal burned through the room like radioactive gossip. Diane and I feigned innocence as the guests gawked in delight, but I noticed Marcelo turning pale. Her gaze met mine across the room, her lips twisted in fury as she realized who was behind her exposure. Bingo! Then a cream-colored shoe came into view, and I followed it up to the enraged face of Miranda Woodrow, Christopher's wife. "You cheap whore," she growled, grabbing Marcelo by the hair. "You thought you could make a fool out of me?" She spun Marcelo around to face the crowd, tearing her dress and exposing her artificial enhancements to everyone. Marcelo screamed, camera flashes went off, and her hands crossed to cover herself. I found Roan's eyes in the crowd. He was looking at his fiancée with a mixture of shock and self-pity. I watched with satisfaction as he realized that Marcelo had used him as a cash cow to fund her needs. Perfect justice. The two people who had ruined my life were now destroyed on the grandest stage. As Marcelo broke free from Miranda's grip and fled in hysterics, Roan turned to me with a blank stare. Our eyes met across the crowd, and I let the triumph show on my face. "You did this to yourself," I mouthed, letting the words hang in the air like the scent of vindication. His jaw clenched, and he nodded, a reluctant acknowledgement of my retribution. He turned and walked out of the ballroom, leaving his humiliation and destruction behind. "Care for some champagne?" Diane asked, appearing by my side. "Well, Mercer Davis," she said with a proud smile. "This evening has been a resounding success. Wouldn't you agree?" A cruel smile stretched across my lips. "As I look back, you have no idea," I replied. "But this is just the beginning of something beautiful." After the catastrophic gala evening, Roan came crawling back, begging for mercy. Seeing him as a shadow of his former arrogant self gave me a wicked satisfaction. Gone were the confidence, superiority, and indifference to my pain. Now, sitting across from me in Diane's office, he looked like a beaten dog. "Alara," he rasped as I looked at him with contempt. "I don't know what to say. What happened with Marcelo?" I was a fool. I remained silent, letting the venom flow as he squirmed under my gaze. "I don't know what to say," he continued, shamefully lowering his head. "I was a terrible person. I'm begging you, give me a chance. Let me make this right." A sharp laugh escaped my lips. "Make it right?" I repeated incredulously. "Roan, you cheated on me with women throughout our marriage, stole money, lied, and manipulated. Do you think you deserve a chance?" His eyes widened as he realized the magnitude of his transgressions. "I was destroyed," he said. "Seeing you with Marcelo. The recording. She used me as a wallet. When the footage surfaced, I realized how blind I had been, how much I had let you down as a husband." I looked at him sternly, refusing to let his remorse disarm me. "Do you have any idea what it was like?" I asked, my voice turning threatening. "To find out that the person I loved, the person I built a life with, not only betrayed me, but humiliated me in the most despicable way. Again and again." Roan shrank back, the weight of his sins bearing down on him. I could see the self-loathing and regret twisting his features. "I was a monster," he said hoarsely. "A selfish, vile monster who didn't deserve your love. I don't expect forgiveness, Alara. I just hope to make amends, even if it means giving up everything." Bell rose in my throat at his plea. As much as I wanted to revel in his suffering, his attempt at atonement made me sick. I was no longer the naive woman he had married. I wouldn't let him manipulate me through feigned remorse. Standing up, I looked him in the eye, seeing a glimmer of hope for redemption in his gaze. It faded with my words. "I don't want your money, Roan," I said. "I want your absence from my life." He flinched, the shock replacing his hangdog expression. "You mean—" he began. "Don't play dumb," I snapped, leaning across the table. "After everything you've done, did you really think I would let you slither back into my life?" "But, Alara," he hissed. "No buts," I hissed. "If you agree to the terms here and now, I will ensure a quick divorce, and you can crawl back to your sordid second act. But you will never ask for forgiveness or understanding. You lost that right when you used our relationship as toilet paper." Diane placed the documents between us, giving him a stern nod. "Your choice, Mre. Davis," she said, looking at him intently. "Either accept the terms and give Mrs. Davis the peace she deserves." Silence stretched as I watched the emotions play out on his face: indignation, shame, acceptance. Finally, with a grunt, he grabbed the pen and signed, sealing the divorce. Our eyes met one last time, and I allowed a triumphant smile to touch my lips. "You won't hear from me again," he said through gritted teeth. "I hope you find peace, Alara. You deserve better than the man I became." He walked out of the office, the weight of his failures following him with every step. I watched until he disappeared down the hallway, exhaling the breath I had been holding. It was over. The man who had once meant everything to me had been cut out of my life like a cancer. Diane placed a hand on my shoulder, her shark-like grin softening. "You did it," she said. "You took back your power and dignity. I've never seen a woman rise from the ashes like you have." I smiled, the promise of possibilities shimmering on the horizon. "This is just the beginning," I said. "My rebirth starts now." 6 months after Roan walked out, the ink on the divorce papers had dried thanks to Diane. I emerged from the ashes of my marriage with most of the assets, including the house where I could start anew, healing my wounds and living in the aftermath of the divorce. Shattering his reputation had brought me no joy. My focus was on myself, on the new chapter. There was a cathartic relief in knowing that the person who had tried to destroy me was now laid low. Gossip columns tore apart our saga, with headlines screaming about the scorned wife who had survived infidelity and become a hero to the divorced. It was a strange but not unpleasant feeling to be in the spotlight after Roan's trauma. I refused to be a victim. My life would be filled with strength, resilience, and creating positivity from the ashes. 3 months after the divorce, I hosted a gala evening at the Web, the scene of Marcelo's downfall. The elite mingled amidst the luxury, a string quartet setting the atmosphere. But there would be no scandals tonight. This was the evening of my foundation supporting women who had experienced infidelity. I received a standing ovation as I outlined the mission helping divorced women. Part of Rhone's millions would be the seed capital. No woman should feel helpless after being betrayed. From the podium, I looked out at the audience with compassion and a sense of community. We would help them bloom as I had in my journey. After my speech, a line of donors formed. I greeted each one with a smile filled with pride. I was a confident woman, the same broken soul who had lain on the kitchen floor a year ago. The transformation was a miracle, a testament to strength, determination, and justice. "Miss Davis," said a man in his 40s with hazel eyes filled with admiration and a slight British accent. "Congratulations on your worthy mission. Your story is inspiring." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. I noticed his tuxedo and sandy hair, a man of means. "You're too kind, I prompted. "Douglas," he supplied with a smile. "Nigel Douglas, a friend of Christopher Woodrow. Though we're in different circles now after his troubles." I smiled, appreciating his understatement. Marcelo and Christopher Woodrow's affair had ruined the magnate's marriage and reputation. Nigel was hinting that he had cut ties with him. "I'm a journalist," he continued. "But my passion is telling stories of courage and resilience. Like yours." My heart fluttered as a spark passed between us. Nigel was charming and easy on the eyes. "Douglas," I said, extending my hand with a smile. "If the spirit moves you, would you care to discuss my trials over a glass of wine?" His warm handshake lingered. "I would be enchanted, Davis," he said. "More than you know." As he smiled across the crowd, I felt a thrill of new possibilities and a future free from the scars of the past. Rhone's betrayal had nearly destroyed me, but I had turned the destruction into a triumph. The future was mine to build on my terms. That evening under the chandeliers of the Westbrook was the beginning of something new and promising.